people don't realize that something like 60 to 70% of all research is never published. All that research is still available to be looked at. It's only the research that promotes pharmaceuticals that essentially gets funded, because that's where the money comes from. The research that shows that some medications don't work gets put in a drawer and rarely seen by people.
Hi, my name is Yana. Thank you for watching. This episode starts with an audio introduction and continues with the video content. So remember to watch it until the end. And subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, share with friends. Thank you for being here and listening to Timeless Teachings. You are listening to Timeless Teachings, a global podcast with Yana Fry. We talk about consciousness, human potential, and mysticism in daily life. Welcome to the next episode of Timeless Teachings. And today our guest is Dennis O'Connor, who is currently in Australia and originally from Ireland. So, Dennis, of course, my first question would be, what are you doing in Australia?
Sometimes I wonder why, with all the craziness that's been going on in the world. But I actually moved to Australia more than 20 years ago, and that's where I've done the bulk of my career. So I started off in London studying nursing, and quickly found myself wanting to look around the world, and ended up in an absolutely beautiful part of Australia called Cairns, which is up near the top, which is quite tropical.
I love that. And Australia is also one of those places around the world where the nature is still intact as much as it can, and people try to grow their own food, and organic farming is big in Australia, and just in general holistic lifestyle. And I feel it's comes together with the topic of our conversation today, where we are going to talk about the healthy living, about to take or not to take medicines and the whole medical industry, and also everything related to the holistic health. And I'm just so excited. So, and it's also such a big subject. So let's decide together, Dennis, where do we begin with that?
Well, I think my journey to get to where I am at the moment, for me, I still am quite incredulous about it, because I had that conventional training as a nurse in England. Then I gravitated towards intensive care, which is kind of one of the pinnacles, or it's one of the hardest areas in nursing. Then I got a little bit burned out and left that, and did some things like became a scuba dive instructor and sold some property. Then I got back into mental health. And now I describe for my clients that I've more or less spent the last 10 years unlearning the majority of the things I was taught. And I think that's very relevant in what's going on today, that the level of, I guess, misinformation and incorrect medical information, especially, that we're getting from all sorts of sources that I certainly thought once I could trust. And now, unfortunately, that level of trust has, as for me, fallen off very much.
Let's go then right into that. The parts when you say that you had to unlearn. So what is it that traditionally was taken as absolute truth, that is proven and not to be questioned, and through your life experience and your own research, you realized that it might have to be challenged? Can you give us an example, please?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's two main areas, but the one that obviously stands out is vaccines, which we can talk about in a little while. But the first one that really kind of started throwing off some of the shackles of my thinking was the subject around antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
And because
That's a
I
very
had that,
big one. Mm-hmm.
absolutely, and because I had that very firm ground in physical health. So things like ventilation and how your bloodstream works and how your stomach works. And then I gravitated from that towards mental health. I went in with a fairly firm knowledge that antidepressants shouldn't be the first line treatment for things like depression, especially. And when I started throwing out those questions to my supposed peers and the people who were experts, I really had a lot of firm challenges in putting those things across. So as a result, you have to start digging deeper yourself to validate what you feel is correct information. Then you dig a little bit more. Maybe there's a little bit of bias involved in my research, but you start stumbling across really incredible people who've done a lot of research on data around the fact that antidepressants especially are more or less useless and come with a lot of harms attached. And one of the people that I really refer to a lot is a fellow called Professor Irving Kirsch, who did a lot
Mhm.
of work in London in around the placebo effect and antidepressants. And then you just have to look at the paperwork that comes in the box and see the horrific side effects from these things to know that we should be focusing on other avenues. And one of my personal story was actually getting into trouble by psychiatrists for explaining one of the risk factors about antidepressants, which actually happens to be increased suicide within the
Mm.
first 2 to 3 weeks of taking them. So because I was telling these some clients and patients about this, I was berated for it because it would turn them off taking these tablets. So to my mind, that is not informed consent, and I've got a really big problem with that. With I guess being corralled like that and almost lying to patients.
Wow. First of all, kudos to you for standing up and being brave. What we know in our
Yeah,
current world and in the history, people like you who actually take on old institutions that also global and connects it usually to a lot of money and a lot of power. Um, it's a brave act. And of course, I mean, your voice, and people might say, well, it is just one voice. And here we have hundreds companies who say something different. And at the same time, I find the purpose of this conversation is just to start asking questions, right?
absolutely.
So, and we are not like, we're not installing any new belief system, and everyone is an adult here. It wouldn't be possible to do it anyway. So each human being has absolute right to make their own decisions. And at the same time, I find it's important to have these kind of conversations where we just ask tough questions. What if what we were told is actually not true? Right? So even if it is unpleasant to look in this direction, and maybe medication around antidepressant is one of those subjects.
Absolutely, and for me, it's very much about having that the I guess having a bit of a sacred idea about informed consent. Because if you're only hearing one side of a story, it's impossible to have informed consent. But deliberately withholding information because you're worried that somebody mightn't take a medication, I mean, that to me is quite unforgivable.
I love that informed consent, and I think it also where the legal system is developing around the world, and people are looking for that more and more before they make any decisions. So, what would you say to people who are listening it right now, and perhaps actually they are on antidepressants? Could well be, or someone in their family who is close to them, and so here they are receiving this information. It might not be working, and it comes as a shock if they hear it for the first time. So, what can they do?
Great question. So, again, a lot of my work centers around understanding language as well. So, when you start dipping into kind of a lot of psychological and psychiatric principles, language does become really important. And again, there's so many myths and misunderstandings around that I try to clarify. And none is more important than the opposite of the placebo effect, which is a thing called the nocebo effect. And one of my pushes continually is to show that things like depression and anxiety should not be considered as conditions or diseases. They should always be considered as symptoms. So the
Mm.
way I like to describe it is that our bodies are just wonderful, wonderful things that are always trying to help us out at any given time. And when we have these symptoms of depression or lethargy or anxiety or any other thing, even chronic pain, it's your body trying to tell you something. You have to change something. And again, I think there's also, you have to, I guess, see firsthand what seems to be working. And I've been very, very fortunate to deal with people who were given these, I guess, these nooses around their necks of these diagnoses with the idea that they're going to have this condition for the rest of their life. And I've been very fortunate to be able to help some of these people no longer have what they previously thought were incurable diseases.
And I know, as we said at the beginning, you stay in Australia, so there are people, in America, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, who might not be able to fly to Australia right away. And so, let's say, for those of them who are listening right now, it kind of maybe not possible for them to see you at the moment, and yet we are having this conversation. So, what can they do?
When I do my assessments, they're very, very heavily weighted physically, and the aspects of trauma and circumstances in your life are very relevant to depression and anxiety. But in so many people who I deal with, there are massive elements of either toxicity or micronutrient deficiency. And this also takes me back to, I guess, my battles that I used to have when I was working in the mainstream system. What many people just have no idea about, and I was actually challenged about this by the so-called experts I was working with, but I was pointing out that serotonin, which is one of the chemicals our body produces for happiness, it's actually produced predominantly in your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is very easy to verify. I actually had instances where my so-called peers were pulling out a chair, opening Google, and crunching the keys to prove me wrong, and then they're turning around going, "Wow, I never knew that." So we've got a massive, massive problem when the experts in the field of mental health don't know that serotonin is produced in your stomach. So, therefore, if you are not looking after your stomach, and the word revolving around that is something called your microbiome, your serotonin production is not going to work properly. So, we peel back the obvious things like toxicity. So, we have to be eating clean food, drinking good water, eating animal products if we eat animal products that have a clean source of eating themselves. And then the other thing is, unfortunately, a lot of our modern foods are really, really deficient in really essential nutrients. Even our modern lifestyle, staying indoors, it deprives us of one of the most important things out there, which is that lovely big yellow ball in the sky called the sun. It's a tablet, it's a medicine. So I look for the obvious things first. And then once we tweak those things, we can go into some of that more niche stuff, which might revolve around things like even intergenerational trauma. So it is a very, very holistic approach, but it has to be quite thorough and breaking down all these little parts together.
Mm-hmm. So it means a basic rule for any human being that first you have to check what you actually put into your body, literally. Right? The
Absolutely.
food that you consume or water or any other liquid, you have to be very clear as much as you can where it's coming from, what you are actually eating, and maybe even do your own research on how can you remove toxicity from your environment. And there is a lot of information out there. I'm just saying it to our audience, guys. It is more like for you to just get curious. You can do your own research. You can also get online. You can. It just goes beyond food. It's also, for example, what cleaning materials are you using to clean your house, right? It also can be toxic. And so it has those physical objects or forms that we have. And also then at the same time, just as you just mentioned now, Dennis, the intergenerational traumas, which is a big one. And they have just a huge effect on our health. And I just love how you're saying that if we look at all of those aspects of ourselves, then we just don't get into those really, really low emotional states that are diagnosed as depression or mental health issues. And I'm so glad you are doing this work. So thank you for that. And
Absolute pleasure. Sorry. Yeah, it's so rewarding, when you have people who have had problems for years that haven't been addressed. And what I've really seemed to find interesting is a lot of the people who do come to me just have been kind of brainwashed by the doctor, unfortunately, and they have no idea about some of these basics. So some of the things, and I've always got to pull myself back and remember that people don't have, I guess, that vision that I've been um, lucky enough to have exposure to just from my jobs and different things I've participated in. But so many people are just missing what I would see as really, really basic stuff. Which, and even the things that you're talking about there, Jana, just before, about what you're putting on your skin. A rule of thumb is if you can't eat it, don't put it on your skin. What are you washing your clothes with? Absolutely, these things are so, so important. And then, as you again identified, the kind of trauma issue does pop up a lot, but I'm a firm believer that we don't have to re-traumatize. There's also other ways to address those things. So I'm a huge fan of sciences like kinesiology, for example, or hypnotherapy, or even shamanic practices, and
Mhm.
uh, substances like psilocybin. So there's we have so many, I guess, gifts and weapons in our armory to be tackling these issues. And I feel my job is almost like a translator to show people if these things are available. And then, as you very correctly said after that, if people don't know about them, they can't do anything. But once that door is open and people can see that these things are available, then they could begin these remarkable journeys of not only just healing themselves, but healing those around them.
And you touched upon a very important topic when we talk about tools. The variety of tools that are available right now for any kind of healing, physical healing, emotional healing, mental healing. And I just want to be, once again, very honest here with everyone that we have to remind ourselves when we go and look for advice. So let's say if we go and talk to an expert in a particular field, because there is some kind of pain or discomfort, whether it is physical or mental or trauma, perhaps, right? So we go and talk to the expert. The expert is also a human being that has their own life story. And through their own pain and their own life story, they have accumulated a certain set of tools that they are offering to people. And most likely, those would be the tools that help them. And so I always find, just as you said, even when we talk about trauma, for some people, it makes sense maybe go and talk to a trauma specialist, like a psychotherapist, and process it. For others, it could be better to do a shamanic journey or any other, or kinesiology, right? Like, or any other alternative way of healing, just because this is what their system responds better to. And I find here it's our responsibility as we are going to a teacher, a master, a doctor, an expert, actually to do our own research about this particular person and their modality and ask ourselves, is that the best modality for me? So the modality might be wonderful, but the question is that the best modality for me? And only person would know. I just find that's a very important aspect.
Yeah, you're making some great points there. One of the things that kind of stands out to me is how the structure of medicine has been created to put what we would now call normal medicine, and the word I would use for that would be allopathic medicine, on a pedestal. And unfortunately, for me, a huge mind shift and a groundbreaker in relation to the way I think about things was when I went on a journey of looking at the history of allopathic medicine, and that history is really quite despicable. It's very, very much driven by pharmaceutical companies, and even the training of people who previously I might have considered experts is a pharmacological driven training. And when what I'd like to do is I'd like to just throw open that door for anybody who's listening when we're considering experts and we're mentioning things like psychologists or psychiatrists or psychoanalysts. I would be very strongly suggesting that those people, we should be very, very skeptical about what information they're giving and where their training is coming from. And I often suggest to my clients that a very good counselor is much better than somebody who has way more sophisticated training, because they don't have those corrupt modalities that have pushed their journey in their training. And I'm not certainly implying that these people have a malicious intent at all. I don't think they do. But certainly, when I look at what seems to work and doesn't work, I often have to reverse the damage done by these so-called professionals, especially psychiatrists.
And I think also if we just look in general at the medical industry, I mean, I definitely have seen it so many times at the doctor's office that pretty much any established doctor who would have an office, and especially if they have been in the industry for a while, they would have developed partnerships with different companies, usually pharmaceutical companies who produce different medications. So it means that the doctor would make a choice, and we can just hope that the choice was for the greater well-being of their patients and not merely financial, right, where the bigger profit is. And those would be the medications that would be prescribed in this particular clinic. And that's why very often, especially privately, right, like a private clinic. So that's why when we go and see different doctors, they might give or prescribe different medications. And there's a common rule. You always need to get at least 1 second opinion about anything remotely serious, just for even that reason. And this is just like a reminder to all of us that doctors are also humans. And maybe in the old days, there was a greater trust from patient's point of view, where you would just show up and the doctor is like a god who prescribes something. But then what we have seen in the world, and I also have seen it like up close within my family and people I know very closely. There is so much mistakes that also doctors do, simply because they are human, and humans just do mistakes in any area of life. So it's very normal. But when it comes to health, it just could be very costly. And usually it's very tightly regulated. So it's hard to prove those things, because then in almost every developed country, when you're signing off everything, when you go into major like operation, when you go into major treatment, so no one's responsible for anything. But then I find it's exactly what you said. For those who are there to receive advice, then it becomes our responsibility to check everything. And like when you go and see, especially if it related to medications, um, ask your doctor or the expert you're going to, what is it specifically? What is it for? What are the side effects? What is the statistics? At least that, because very often people don't receive immediate information. So something is being given to them, and then at the counter, they just receive that. And there is a way how to take it. And then you go home, you do it, never asking questions. What is it? What is it made from? Is it compatible with my system? Right? So, I mean, if you already go into this traditional medicine, then at least do the best research you can. And at the same time, I think the world now moving more and more into the holistic approach. Like people really feel it is time. So I'm with you on that, Dennis. I feel that any illness should be able to be treated with the holistic methodology. We just have to find out what it is. And our ancestors definitely knew more than we know now. So we have to remember what it was. And holistic health should be rising.
Absolutely. And there's so many points just to cover in that little conversation there. But again, when we don't know about some areas of research, we're really, our hands are tied. And when I follow some great leaders in their fields and look at some of their work, they just throw open so many different avenues. So, for example, uh, people don't realize that something like 60 to 70% of all research is never published. All that research is
Mm.
still available to be looked at. It's only the research that promotes pharmaceuticals that essentially gets funded, because that's where the money comes from. The research that shows that some medications don't work gets put in a drawer and rarely seen by people. I'm again, to reiterate what you said before. Another huge problem with the medical industry is the fact that it's in symptom reduction or symptom treatment. And if you're treating a symptom, you don't know what's driving that symptom. And this should be where the focus is. But unfortunately, if that's the focus, you don't get repeat customers. So, for example, we've got these terms like idiopathic hypertension. Idiopathic means we don't know what's causing it. Hypertension is high blood pressure. And we get a tablet to bring your blood pressure down. Your body is not stupid. Your body is never doing something wrong, it's always trying to compensate from something. So when people have high blood pressure, there's usually some kind of stressor or toxicity involved that your body's trying to work out. And that's just one of many examples. So, and just basically back to what you were just saying before, that holistic approach, absolutely incredibly important. We have to be ruling out, as I said, these deficiencies or toxicities before we even consider a path that involves pharmaceutical medications.
And how do we choose our holistic doctors or advisors? That's the other question, right? There are many, many millions in the world, and there are quite a few people who are going now in this direction. So for someone who would like perhaps to get this opinion and looks at the variety of holistic experts, so how do you choose one?
Well, that's a fantastic question, actually. I haven't really thought about that too much in depth, but I'd have my own little criteria for that. If somebody wants you to keep on coming back and wants you to be buying a lot of different stuff off them, whether it's medications or whether it's supplements or whatnot, I'd be steering clear of those people. The second thing I'd be considering is, are they local, and is there a way that you can find out some testimonials from them, people who have went to them? And for example, in my local area here, there's some fantastic people who are having great results with different illnesses and different treatments. So I refer a lot of my clients to some of those people. So definitely do your investigations, talk to as many people as you can, see if they seem to be working with integrity. again, when I'm dealing with clients, I don't want them coming back to me. If they feel like they have to come back to me a lot, I'm missing something there. I'm not the right person for them. And the normal medical models have this repeat customer thing going on. Again, that's a business model. A repeat customer generates more income. So a lot of what I do is more or less, I try to have this in my thinking to do the opposite of what these conventional systems are doing.
It is so true, and I love the word integrity. And what you touched upon here, we're talking about community pretty much. And I just remember, for example, when I was growing up, I mean, we had like a one pediatrician, there was one doctor, it was a woman, and she was looking after every child in this particular neighborhood where I was living. And she was doing it for 30 years of her life, right? So it's a generation after generation in that sense. And it also gives you this element of trust. You know where the person is coming from, you know where the family is living, you know what kind of family they have, you know people who saw them maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I just find it again perhaps how it used to be in the older days, the community wisdom and also the accountability that we usually have within our community is far greater than when we work with people we have no idea where they come from and we don't know anything about them, right? It's like one of those rules, maybe smaller towns or like a tighter communities where actually people hold each other to be truthful because they see each other every day. And so with the modern world and this interconnectivity and globalization, everyone moves around so much. And sometimes you meet someone and you realize you know nothing about that person. And you probably should do your research, especially when it comes to your health.
Absolutely, absolutely. It even just makes me think. But again, one of the little stories I have recently, I just got a video from a client today in relation to, I've been seeing his dog as a patient, and now about 8 weeks ago, the dog was given 2 weeks to live. And that's so 6 weeks later. So the first picture, I've got a couple of really quite incredible pictures. This poor dog looks like he is dead on the first picture. And the video I got yesterday is this dog that's running around barking, can't wait to eat. So I mean that really for me is a really it's a blight on the current veterinary system, which resembles the allopathic medical system very very closely. There are so many different answers. There's so many different remedies which people are able to access. And something else you're touching on, really, which I think is very, very important. We've managed to survive for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And there were modalities that have been carried through traditionally, which were working for people. And now we've just been, I think, brainwashed with something called the science to tell us that this is the pinnacle of our existence. Well, I really, the more I do my research and the more I look at things, I think that's far from the truth. I think some of these much older modalities have absolutely incredible merit. And again, acupuncture being a great example, one that's been used so successfully for tens of thousands of years in Asia.
Absolutely. And I actually didn't know, Dennis, that you're also supporting animals as your patients because I
That was
just
an accident.
I just lost a dog, like literally like a week
Oh,
ago or something. I mean,
wow.
she was at the age, she was 12 and a half years old,
Yeah.
medium-sized dog. So for her size, I mean, it was a good life. But to be honest, if I knew you were working with the dog, I would at least try to reach out because for
But
those who have pets, they become
yeah,
like family members, right? It's like visiting a
that's
human.
absolutely, that's one of two dogs. So basically, this dog belonged to a friend of mine, so it was more of an accident than actually advertising anywhere. But that person was talking to another person at the local markets who reached out to me, and that dog was also given 2 weeks to live. So that was about 4.5 weeks ago. And since then, this other dog is also starting to eat again, and looking like it's turning quite a significant corner. So it's quite interesting, I guess, for me. Just my forte is obviously people. That when you, I guess, try to put this good energy out, you don't necessarily end up just helping. It's not necessarily that you're going to go in the direction you think you are. Just other interesting little things seem to spring up from that.
Exactly. And you were also talking about vaccinations. Maybe let's just,
Oh,
I know it's a huge subject and
yeah.
probably at least 3 hours conversation. So let's try to keep it, condensed with the timing and just
Yeah.
touch upon this, your point of view, research you have done. What do you think? Of course, the most common, which is most people have been vaccinated in the last 3 years, right? So tell us about vaccinations.
Yeah, it it really reinforces to me my opinion that the medical system is somewhat of a cult, and I started looking into the whole area of vaccinations about, I don't know, 2 3 years or so before COVID kicked in. And I remember even just starting my investigations of looking, I was nervous, and I'm not a very nervous person. I've kind of done martial arts and I'm fairly confident, but just typing in some information to research about questioning the platform, the basics of the whole medical system, which is vaccinations, was making me anxious. I look back now and I'm really incredulous at the amount of fear I had to do that. And the first one I looked at was basically the polio vaccine. And initially, for about 2 3 weeks, I was saying, "Now this is rubbish. This is rubbish." And then after a while, you're thinking, "Wow, can this be true?" And after a while, really, and I can say again, people don't have to listen to me. It's just about opening that door. People have to do their own research in this. But I would say, from my perception, there hasn't been one vaccine that has ever been efficacious for humanity. And I think they all have been harmful. And the polio one is a really good example of that. So we think that polio has disappeared. It hasn't. The vaccine for polio that caused the reduction in polio came out roughly the same time when genetic marking came out. And when genetic marking came out, the polio vaccine was broken up into 4 different diseases. So overnight, 70% odd of all polio diagnoses just disappeared. And that was
Mm.
conveniently at the same time as the polio vaccine came out. Then we have other absolutely empirical research to show that hygiene was one of the biggest things responsible for these massive cleanups in other so-called diseases that vaccines uh, were meant to have fixed. And then we can look at a thing called DDT, which is a horrendous poison that was being sprayed on everybody. And if you track the DDT sales in the 1920s and the 1910s, along with rates of polio, with a 6 month lag, they're exactly the same. So DDT was cancelled, so then polio went down, and all this is attributed to a vaccine. So that for me was just really shook all my thinking in relation to the foundations of the medical system. And it was really quite traumatizing going through that realization that one of the pinnacles of my belief systems was shattered.
And at the same time, many people have been vaccinated, that as children and as adults. And so, speaking about toxins, I'm just wondering if there is an advice perhaps you can give to any human being who just would like to upgrade their health. What are the ways to somehow reduce the negative imprint of the vaccination and to clean your body from the toxins that any human can do?
Excellent. And I think you're probably leaning more towards the vaccine that was the so-called safe and effective vaccine that was rolled out in the last 3 years.
Well,
But
this is because this is probably
mm,
affected the largest number of people, right? Yeah.
yes, of course, absolutely.
For those
And
who
the
have been
first,
vaccinated from COVID, if we start questioning the vaccination, regardless of which one, where it came from, and if you're wondering now whether it's good for your health, so what can you say? But people don't scare, right?
yeah,
So we don't want to create extra anxiety around it. So let's just talk about what can we do in terms of health. And just please make sure you keep the mic closer also, so I make sure I hear you good. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, listen, clean up your water, clean up your food. Absolutely number one thing every single time. And the other two absolutely incredible healing modalities we have are the sun and the earth. So getting our shoes off and doing something called earthing and grounding. So this dumps inflammation. And then after that, we can consider things that actually do pull toxicity from our bodies. And these things might be Shilajit is a very good one. You have diatomaceous earth. which is another good one. You have different types of carbon, which also have that kind of chelating pulling effect. And there's a lot of discussion around spike proteins. So it does seem to be that there are things that can effectively bind to spike proteins. One of those things is a thing called suramin. You can find that in, I think, in pine needle tea. So yeah, so there are actually lots of different things we can do. Some things will work better for some people as opposed to others. And also, it seems to me that because I've looked very heavily into that area, that it seems there are different batch numbers that are associated with less harms. So some people might be much less affected, and other people might be dramatically more affected. Then you can break down the different companies, the different brands that people have taken as well. So I think, and also that just for people to really have that hope and that belief that the body is a miraculous machine. It is always trying to help us. And this then comes back to something which I'm also very, very passionate about, the placebo effect.
Mm-hmm.
And the placebo effect can heal anybody of anything. We have this documented in Western medical literature of people with things like Huntington's, which are terrible end of life diseases, going to Lourdes in France, taking holy water and being fully cured. That these are examples of the placebo effect. So I think never lose hope. We have to be positive. We have to just really reinforce within ourselves our capacity for healing. That's where the true magic lies. And this is what I try to bring people towards in my journeys with them. Start with those kind of nuts and bolts basics, and then open up that understanding and that realization to where the magic is, and that is things like the placebo effect.
Absolutely. And it's such an important point about how much we are actually controlling what is happening in our body, in our mind, and in the reality around us. And I think especially when we have having conversations, anything related to vaccinations, people, we don't want them, falling into the anxiety attack and depression that, well, the vaccination happened already because for many it did. And then, so what do I do right now? Right. And so to your point, I like it. It's please do not panic. So, and even if something was there in a particular batch that you received, it is not the end of the world. And there are tools and there are things you can do. There are things you can do on a practical level. It's just what Dennis said about food and water and certain, extra supplements that just helping detoxification of your body. But it's most important in your mind, right? So with the placebo effect. So if you're truly encouraging this belief within yourself that you can heal yourself from anything that doesn't serve you, you will succeed 100%. And I think that this is very important just to keep reminding ourselves that whatever might be happening to us is actually always happening for us. And we are always in charge how we can work with that. So I find this is very important.
Absolutely. And another thing I would add, it seems to me that there's a little bit of an attack happening on humanity at the moment, unfortunately, and vaccines is one way of doing things. But these very, very huge multi-corporate companies, including pharmaceutical companies, including these massive brands that are controlling our shopping and our food, and this relates back to something that you said before, that importance of community. So we need to be going back to knowing who's growing our food, knowing where our water is coming from. And another thing that I invariably tell just about everybody I see is don't buy anything in the supermarkets. It's
Yeah.
poisoned. So grow your own stuff if possible. Make sure the ground that you're growing it in is good. Talk to your farmer. Find out where your animals are coming from. So this move away benefits from the corporations, benefits everybody, benefits your local and it benefits the environment, benefits the local business people there, and it also protects us if these companies want to switch off our food. If we're trucking in food from here, there, and everywhere, or if we are buying food locally and we know where we can get it, this makes us very, very safe and protects us. So this kind of, I guess, holistic methodology or way of looking at things, it's a win-win on just about every single level.
I love it, Dennis. Okay, so one of my few final questions, we will be coming, I think, soon to our time. So you, one person who lives in Australia, and I think that it's phenomenal what you do, and there are people now listening to that. What are the options, right? So for those who maybe live somewhere around your neighborhood, of course, they can come and see you. But those who are not, is it something that you can help them via online sessions? Is it possible to do like online diagnostics? Let's just get it out in the air so people know what ways to reach out and in what ways can you help?
Absolutely. Listen, I do a lot of public speaking. I can run workshops or Zoom classes online. I've actually got a full health course which I've just completed, which I'm just putting on my website now. It's just about finished actually. But yeah, people can contact me on Dennis DENNIS at awakeninginhealth.com for any information. I do Zoom consults that involves a fairly thorough questionnaire or an assessment. Then the the consults usually take at least 90 minutes because they're fairly thorough by the time I go through the different parts that are going wrong in people's lives and then delivering the information they need to hear. Sometimes they can take up to 2 hours, and then afterwards there's a follow-up assessment plan that the people will have to be able to follow as well. But yeah, certainly, listen, I think we're in fairly tough circumstance at the moment. So the more I can do to, keep people strong and help people, that I'm getting a benefit from that as well. I feel much better about myself doing things that I know that are working. But yeah, I'm certainly open for anybody to reach out to me, and I can try and help. And again, I'm not promising anything. It's about other people giving that responsibility back to people about their own health. But again, just opening those doors of possibilities that people mightn't have heard about before.
Exactly. And of course, we're also going to include all the relevant links for people to connect with you in the description of the podcast and YouTube. So, guys, please make sure you check it out and you can link and click directly. And my final question for today, Dennis. So, if you were to talk to a 7 years old today in any country around the world, what advice would you give them?
Any particular country or any country?
Anywhere. So we go global, right? Anywhere.
Gotcha. If I and a 7-year-old, so
Yes.
a young person, okay,
Yes.
I would have to say question everything and have love and gratitude for everything.
I love that. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dennis. And thank you guys for showing up and also listening to our conversation today. We're going to be back with another guest soon. And in the meantime, just remember to subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel, and we talk soon.
Awesome, Yana. Thank you so much.
A gentle reminder that this is not a regular podcast, because here we have no rules and no scripted questions. All conversations are spontaneous, unfiltered, and real, with people from all over the world, regardless of their race, religion, nationality, skin color, language, or social circumstances. The intention for this podcast is to showcase the infinite variety of how human beings think and what they do to create happiness, fulfillment, self-realization, health, wealth, legacy, and overall, a truly spectacular life. Did you enjoy the interview? Feel free to share this episode with friends, subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And remember, you are the master of your own life.